The case study under review here today is an evaluation of the public procurement and disposal of assets' role in ensuring efficiency and effectiveness in the implementation of the procurement policy and act in Uganda. This is one of the many important evaluations that we commissioned in Uganda, which has very rich lessons for learning and for informing policy and future planning and management of evaluations, both in the country and I think in the region.
We're looking at procurement and evaluation in the public procurement sector, to be specific, and trying to see how the results from this evaluation were used in informing reforms that at the time were being undertaken. So to try and showcase how an evaluation can be helpful in a complex sector like the public procurement.
The PPD Act was enacted in 2003 and amended in 2013. And as you're aware, public procurement accounts for a significant proportion of the public financial management system. The Act was put in place to promote transparency, accountability, and value for money in public procurement. Over 10 years down the road, it's always important that you review whether you're meeting the objectives of the Act in the first place. Is there improved performance in meeting the objectives of public procurement? Has corruption reduced? Is there more transparency? Is there more accountability? Do we have value for money? Are contracts being completed in time, within value, or even the right quality of products out there in public procurement? So that was the purpose of that evaluation, to look at how things are working and if they are meeting the objectives of why they were put in place. And that's important because then it informs your next steps. Do you amend the Act? Do you change something here or there? What is not working? What is working well? And what do we learn from it?
Our responsibility as a directorate was to develop the terms of reference, to procure the evaluation team, to supervise the evaluation team, to guide and support the evaluation team in terms of arranging appointments, identifying the appropriate stakeholders to consult, preparing introduction letters. The evaluation involved lots of interviews, interviewing procurement entities, procurement officers, and procurement stakeholders, but it also involved a lot of analysis of procurement files and procurement records across a number of ministries, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Works, and different government departments, and also donor institutions. This procurement was very consultative. We had 2 consultative national workshops where stakeholders were engaged, very deep discussions and interrogation of the factors that affect procurement in the country, budgeting, finance, management, and so on, and very good recommendations of how those should be improved. Very broad dissemination. I mean, the fact that the World Bank co-funded this activity, they have a big dissemination facility through their databases and through their websites, but also within government, we were able to widely disseminate, distribute the reports, present the findings to as many stakeholders as possible, and I think that worked very well. We were using a very experienced team of evaluators with international reputation for good evaluations. This was an Indian firm that had done similar work in several countries. And so there was a lot of confidence that they will do a good job and bring the knowledge and experience that they have from elsewhere to this process. Our intention was initially that the evidence from this evaluation should influence or inform the amendment of the PPDA, the Public Procurement and Disposal Authority Act. But the amendment of the Act was not properly timed with the evaluation. And so we lost that opportunity. But the evaluation generated very useful evidence which informed the development of the procurement regulations and procurement guidelines. The procurement was commissioned by the Office of the Prime Minister in partnership with the World Bank. The World Bank is the biggest development partner in the country. The Office of the Prime Minister is a supra-ministry in the government of Uganda. So those two institutions command a lot of respect and authority. Therefore, there was quite a good buy-in. So this procurement came in at the right time when every stakeholder was interested in understanding what successes and what failures we had experienced in the past.
The evaluation made several recommendations. Some recommendations were adopted. Some recommendations were found to be a little bit too strong, if you like, because it was not possible to completely overhaul the procurement policy and the procurement guidelines. The evaluation also informed the amendment of the procurement guidelines in areas like the procurement thresholds and the procedures to clear procurement contracts and so on. Those benefited from that amendment. The other unintended use and benefit which we have realized from this evaluation is that the evaluation was done professionally and is actually being used by the universities to train the students. So it's a good example that has been adopted by the universities that train in development evaluation. And also by the Uganda Evaluation Association. They use it to train the young evaluators, and for us that's a good case of a good evaluation study.
There is better transparency because they advertise most of the public contracts. You know whom to ask certain questions if some things go wrong. People can complain if they are not satisfied with certain processes, which was not the case before because we didn't know what, how, where and how to complain. So transparency has definitely improved. Accountability has also improved because there's a trail, there are responsible centers. The structure is such that there are different responsibilities right from an accounting officer who is the chief executive of every government agency. You have a contracts committee, you have an evaluation committee, and so there's accountability. There are structures that you can hold accountable.
Office of the Prime Minister is very key because it monitors government projects, but also the integrity of the external consultant. It is being seen as independent because procurement has a lot of corruption and fraud. So whoever does an evaluation there, you're going to be looked at with a very critical eyes. They ensure that they have monthly meetings with the stakeholders, keeping them appraised and informed of the updates and whatever they were finding. So I think this was very critical in keep getting some of the things along the way and not waiting for the final report.
This particular case study was commissioned about April 2011. It took longer than many evaluations. It concluded in 2013. An evaluation of this nature is always complex, especially when it is being done at the first time. And so one reason that made it difficult, and that's why it actually took long, was it was difficult to get answers to the evaluation questions that were designed. So the evaluation team really struggled to get useful answers from the procurement units and procurement officers. The record system was not perfect, and so lots of the data had data gaps, and it was very difficult to collect adequate information to inform the analysis to get the results and evidence that we wanted. Secondly, this being an international firm, they had to be coming in from India periodically, and every time they come, there's a bit of loss of memory and continuity over time, and they needed first understand the institutional culture and program management practices in the country and so on. Thirdly is procurement is a sensitive function in government. It involves a big percentage of the national budget, More than 60% of the national budget was being spent through procurement. It's also an area that is prone to corruption tendencies and so on. And so it's a sensitive function in government and not easy to evaluate because of those complexities. It is very important to follow through not just the generation of the evidence, but also how it is used and actually how that use is causing change in development outcomes. Previously, we thought our interest would be just to commission a study, get the results, the recommendations, and pass them over to the respective policymaker. But that's not enough. From this case, we have learned that we need to go beyond that. We need to help the policymaker they use to understand the recommendation and the evidence at the table. And we need to have ownership of that evidence and to support the process of actually using that evidence to inform policy and how it affects development outcomes. We don't have to pay attention just to the immediate processes and results of the procurement. There are lots of unintended benefits and unintended factors that influence the process, which sometimes are actually more important than the formal process. And so in this particular case, the importance of the use of champions. A champion is a leader, a policymaker, an official who is in a position of influence and who passionately supports the exercise, the process. Also, over time, there was better buy-in by the stakeholders to provide the right information to the evaluation team. Initially, they thought it was some kind of audit and some kind of investigation on the procurement systems. But over time, they learned that no, an evaluation really was meant to understand the positives and lessons in order to improve how we do procurement in the future. One thing that I would do differently is to use national consultants. There is a lot more ownership, and now we have the capacity. In the past, we didn't have evaluation teams with the experience and the knowledge to undertake such a complex procurement. But now we have good evaluation teams within the country, and I would be happy to use national evaluators.
Public procurement involves so many stakeholders. You have the government agencies, you have bidders are the private sector, you have civil society engaged, you have the general public that are the recipient of some of these services. In many cases, they have not been speaking together. But what we have learned is that there is need for constant engagement among the key stakeholders. One of the lessons we've learned is to engage citizens in monitoring government contracts. The government agencies, much as they are being mandated to monitor public procurement from a capacity perspective, and I'm not saying just technical skills, but also in terms of the reach, are not in a position to reach every sub-county, every locality in the country. We need to have social accountability where the citizens are involved in demanding for accountability, in monitoring their projects in their localities.
M&E is a lot about learning, and so for us it's an opportunity to quality check, but also to learn from others what we are doing. But in this book, we have expertise from elsewhere that brings in a different dimension. It brings in new analytical tools, new methods of looking at what we do, new approaches in evaluations, in research. Bringing all this, cutting across the continent, I think is a huge experience and also learning for us and for our team.
I think the thing that I would want to emphasize is we need to invest a lot more research, studies to promote evidence-based decision-making when it comes to public procurement, so that we know which areas we need to respond to I don't think initially we invested a lot in research in public procurement, in monitoring and evaluation, and even when we did, to have that information synthesized and analyzed and put in a format that helps policymakers make certain decisions that they should make in as far as public procurement is concerned. So that, for me, emphasizes the point on why we need to invest in evidence-based policy making, decision making.